All right. Welcome to Badger Beer Hour. Ryan Koga, thanks for joining us, the man of the hour. One
Thank
of
you.
them.
Thanks for having me. Thank you for inviting me back
So
on.
yeah, so we're well, maybe not obviously, hopefully not obviously. We are recording this in this kind of inception moment where you currently are at the launch party, the relaunch party at your brewery for Ale Asylum, and and
Yeah.
we are talking about that. I don't know. Anyway, welcome to Badger Beer Hour. Thanks for joining us. It's been a pretty big week for you guys. How has the reception to this big news been?
Very positive, overwhelmingly positive, um, which is it's been fantastic from that. I'm really blown away. I mean, that was the bet, right? That we would it would be everyone else or enough people would think it was a good enough idea, the same the way that we thought it was a good idea,
Yeah,
and
what was
didn't flub and fall flat on its face in the first minute.
right?
That
Yeah,
would have
so
sucked.
you've met that far.
Yeah, wired
So
the money, and then the next like announced it the next day, and
everybody's like, "Oh, why,
yeah,
why?" Okay, so what was it? You mentioned like it seems like a good idea. So what was it about this that kind of made? I mean, I think it's fairly obvious to people who follow who know their way around the Madison beer scene or the Wisconsin beer scene even, but kind of talk about why you made this jump and how it kind of came to be, I guess. But mostly why first, I guess.
why is good? Why is good?
Yeah.
Well, that's the first question we had to answer. As I stretch back and do the,
Oh, look at that. That's cool.
we had some fresh shirts printed up. So
Nice.
I got to hand Dean and Otto the first Ale Asylum shirts they didn't pay for first.
There you go.
Like I was like, here
Nice.
you go. For the first and foremost, it was a good business decision. We There's blood in the streets with craft brewing, and it's Ale Asylum experienced a part of that. I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus. I mean, this whole thing happened, as I kept saying. Now it's be the third time I've probably repeated this, but first time to you. We're not sitting here doing like a big touchdown dance. That this is the conditions under which this happened. Right?
Yeah.
It's like here we are. Here, this is what the world is, and this was an option in front of us, and it made good business sense. And Ale Asylum as a brand, as a portfolio, is just something that shouldn't die. It's an iconic Madison thing. We hope to be considered in the same type of vein with like the Madison craft beer scene. We've just finished 10 years, just celebrated 10 years, so hopefully that's a milestone that puts us in the book with that. But you know, we've we felt the same economic pressure everyone else has too. Costs are through the roof. Cans used to be under 8 cents a piece, and now they're 16 cents plus a piece, depending. And that's like a 12-ounce can or like a 16-ounce can. It doesn't. Things are just going crazy. And when we first launched, there was not even 2,000 breweries in the U.S., and now there's over 9,000. So the it's grown into the competition. It's grown into more than just a good idea and fun and a good place to be, but it's real competition, and there's real market forces being felt now on all sides. So for ourselves, we have the capacity to make maybe 15, 16,000 barrels of beer, just pure beer in our fermenters. That's what our fermenter farm will tolerate, and our packaging line and such. And then, but we still have the packaging line still has the capacity for a few thousand more barrels. So this year we already knew, like last year, we probably weren't going to get more than maybe 10,000 barrels of our own stuff going. But we definitely needed quite a bit more to make, to still be a business, to still be viable, to be solvent. So we started looking toward some contract customers, one of which last year we acquired. Zach and I acquired Wisco Pop with Sparkle. So we thought we'd do some non-alcoholic stuff there. And we'll probably get into the like legal THC drinks as well in that realm. But the whole Ale Asylum part as a portfolio, as the IP, was the ability to basically create or be our own contract client in that sense. Where it's great. It's actually been really fun doing contract brewing, get to meet fellow area brewers and see what their passions are, learn their methods, and try to bring it home for them. Um, but you never know if they're going to commit to batches, if they're on the schedule, off the schedule,
Mhm.
if it's one and done. You hope you set a good pattern, but you never quite know. And this was a chance, like Wisco Pop, to basically buy some business for ourselves, and so it made business sense. But it's just such a beautiful, like Madison type of story, I think, in the end, and I mean a good Wisconsin type story in the end too. It's Midwest nice type of thing, but just as
Sure.
like neighbors in Madison, and then all the different connections of that we started, that we're in Ale Asylum's original place, right? Like we still have, of all the tanks and things that we've changed and equipment we've swapped out over the years, we still have the original brew house. So like the original first batch of Hopalicious was brewed on the same brew house we brewed our first batch of Hopalicious.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also have a couple of their team members that last summer, when Ale Asylum did have to close its doors and make its last batch, we were very fortunate to have a couple of those team members join our team as well. And
Nice.
they've been awesome to have, awesome to work with, and so you have the people who were brewing it and they're brewing it again, and then we get to leverage some of our uh, our abilities, the things that we've done for marketing or whatever else, and we're not here to like put our own spin on everything, like we're here to like shepherd and respect and bring forward what was, and it wasn't really down for the count. It was almost out. It's like a Rocky movie, right? It's like it got to like the 9, almost a 10 count. Now it's back on its feet,
Okay.
or
So let me jump into exactly what kind of some of the nuts and bolts of what happened here. So, um,
sure.
I think this is so you alluded to this, that this is not Carbon 4 buying Ale Asylum. This is you and your brother Zach buying the Ale Asylum IP and contract brewing it at Carbon 4, right? Do I have that?
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
it's our personal debt that's
Okay.
taking it out and buying the business for it. So
Is
it just leaves things to be a bit more nimble, um,
okay.
and less heavy. Yeah.
Is there anything to like, does that represent anything as far as like Carbon 4 not wanting to do that, or okay. Um and then I guess the other part of it is uh the, so was it all of the IP? So what
Yeah,
exactly is included, and exactly did you guys buy?
that's a good question. That's a good question.
Yeah.
That's the one that kind of gets muddied, or it doesn't translate as well if you don't, unless you're doing a
Yeah.
discussion, an interview like this. It is all the intellectual property, so all the brands, trademarks, recipes, website, marketing, all of that kind of an intellectual property is what we purchased. So it wasn't any hard assets apart from tap handles or
Okay.
festival banners, maybe if we can
Okay.
find them, if they're still out there. We might get a few of those things, but
Okay.
everything else, it's like intellectual. It's like soft assets in that sense of we created a Dropbox and Otto, and we've been filling it with like all the imagery and even like just today, for instance, I think Otto is like right in the middle of doing like a refresh on the design for the Hopalicious can, and so we're kind of picking up where he left off on
Okay.
that, even trying to get like another set of things done. But yeah, so recipe, trademarks, brands, basically. So we
Right. And
were able then to brew any brand that Ale Asylum had made. We now own and control that.
okay. So that's an interesting point, or that's an interesting detail, I guess, that there was a change in that brand. I mean, which is like, the I mean, like there's a reason you're starting with Hopalicious, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
that's so that's the one that a lot of people like have looked for, and I think a lot of people really miss. Um but I guess like that question of like changing that, or your ability to change that and refresh the brand or whatever is like there's got because one of the things that you're buying is into that history and that
Mhm.
brand presence and awareness. So there's got to be a balance there between like, well, we're not going to just like start changing everything because we want people to understand this is the same thing that they loved for so many
Mhm.
years. And I don't know, how does that
And
kind
and
of how
then
do you think about
and
that?
then there's a but in there too.
Yes. Yes.
I've told this analogy a couple times too, and I don't know how to do it any better. It's kind of a morbid analogy, but it feels like as if I was the guardian of some children, and the parents got into a bad car wreck and died, or were disabled or whatever, and so they're like I have to raise them like my children now, and so as those children, the brands, as they come to life and grow and still mature, like um I'll always think about, what would the parents have wanted for this thing. But there are going to be times where, as the world turns and moves on, that we'll have to make decisions that we feel are in the best interest of like what's the reality right now, you
Yeah.
know. But the good news is, that Otto and Dean, especially in this sense when it comes to recipes, that we have the ability to just call him and talk to him and and say, hey, I got a question here. Why'd you do that? Or what if you think if we did this or we did that?
Hmm.
Um, in fact, one thing that we're uh, working through in that sense, even with Hopalicious, we also have Joe Waltz as our quality director right now too, and that guy is beyond brilliant.
Oh, he was one of the folks who came over to
Yeah,
Carbon Store.
actually, yeah, he had left Ale Asylum at one point, and he went to the West Coast to go work for Narrows Brewing. He got a head brewing
Oh, okay.
job there, and then he actually came back to Ale Asylum and was there for a couple more years. And then he went to Octopi for maybe 2 years, and I'd been
Okay.
talking on and off to Joe, for a long time, never trying to like poach and get in there, but we just had, over time, hey, you want to grab a beer, or whatever else, and how are things going? And it was always when I find certain people, I'm just like, hey, man, I'm never going to dislodge you from where you're at and where you're happy, but I just want to let you know if you ever run into a situation where you wonder or you lose a job or something happens, like I would love the opportunity to work with you. And I've had several team members come through the brewery under those circumstances, and Joe at one point in time in Octopi reached out and he said, I'm not sure about this or that, but and we were very clear at that time too that uh, I didn't want him coming on board if it wasn't under like the right work. What am I trying to say here? Like job, like what his role was. So for him, he really, really, really wants to do like research and development type stuff. And I said, okay, you can own our whole R&D program, the whole power, it's all yours. But I need you to also do this quality management and kind of set the whole brewery straight. But in
Right.
whatever time else you want to carve out, go for it. So
And
anyway, one
just
thing,
jumping
go
in
for it.
here, Joe's previous role at Ale Sound was quality. He was the head of quality, right? Is that
Yeah,
correct?
he had been brewing there, and then he became. I think when he came back, he pretty much was like doing quality control and like production manager and stuff like that. He's doing a lot of
Yeah. So
scheduling and
I guess to
did a
those
lot
who
of
don't
stuff.
know who Joe is, he's a pretty high up in the hierarchy there
Yeah,
in terms of the brewing.
WALTS. Look him up. If he's not already being talked as this, I'm going to pump him up as it is. Not just because he's currently on my team, but he deserves it. I think he's one of the premier minds in brewing, if in the region, if not like the country for craft beer. He's beyond brilliant, and he just really loves beer. Like he just lives and breathes it. It's in him. He hates when I keep saying it, but he started off his career as like an aerospace engineer, like a rocket scientist. But he'll say that I barely got into it, and I'm like, I know, dude, but you passed all the tests to kind of get your foot in the door, which makes you really brilliant. So his approach is methodical, and he's funny. He's incredibly humble. He's has a very large role in the region, our region's Master Brewers Association. He's published. He's just awesome, man. I love the dude. So one thing we're dealing with even with Hopalicious right now is there's a bigger thing kind of not attacking craft beer, but you're seeing it like with gushers and cans that are experiencing hop creep. Especially beers that have like C hops, like a Cascade Centennial, perhaps Columbus, but other things too. It turns out that there's enzymes that are in the certain hop strains that when you dry hop with them, they will go and they will come loose from the hop material. They will start breaking down the dextrins and convert them into fermentable sugar. And so the yeast that's left in there will start fermenting. So it'll either, if you catch it at the right time in your fermenter, your gravity will continue to creep down. But if you didn't know it was happening and you package that beer, you might package it at perfect carbonation. But if there's any little bit of yeast in there, those enzymes are making free sugar and you're going to overcarbonate your can and it's going to turn into a gusher. Okay. So we actually experienced that a little bit with Hawk Jones until we figured out exactly what it was. And there's a lot of Centennial in there. So even with these first rounds of Hopalicious, there's quite a bit of
Cascade,
dextrin malt.
Right? That's a Cascade beer? That's
correct,
a Cascade?
Yep. Yeah, Hopalicious is all Cascade, 100% Cascade. And as a caveat here, another little rabbit hole, but more modern hop pelletizing techniques are focused on pelletizing the hops at lower temperatures. There's like a Play-Doh press type of thing that turns like the hops into pellets. And when you are doing that, it creates a lot of pressure and it can create a lot of heat. And then you can actually start to break down the enzymes, but it also starts to break down hop oils and like really quality things you want from your hops. So when you start doing that as a cool press, you preserve those enzymes, and then which means better smelling hops and quality, but you also then like increase your ability for hop creep. So like with Hopalicious being a lot of Cascade and all Cascade, we were experiencing hop creep, but we found it in the fermenter first. So we let it kind of come down. So now we kind of have to rethink a little bit like, oh, hang on a second. This is the intent of the recipe, but now we're using these new hops or, newer whatever. So we got to figure out how to hit the old idea with new problem, new ingredients or new.
Interesting. Okay.
So those are the types of things that we'll have to adjust fire as necessary.
Yeah. Okay. So one of the things that let's stay on the beer for a second before we turn back to the business stuff. I'm sure you've been hearing like just name after name after name after name of Ale Asylum beer that everybody, when I'm sure the second thing, first everybody's like, oh, that's so cool, way to go. And the second thing is like, you got to bring back this beer. So I'm going to give you my three. I'm just going to give you three. Bedlam, Ambergeddon, and Birrio. Birrio is a sleepy dark horse in the Ale Asylum portfolio, I believe. It's kind of a new fellow there, but that's a nice little pale ale. I'm sure you hear a lot of like Madtown Nut Brown, Unshadowed. Like what's the plan for all this? Like, how do you have any sense yet of like how to sort all that out and like how are you thinking about like, okay, now what?
That's a great question. That is kind of the question for us right now.
Yeah.
That's in fact, I don't often go through like the social media comments and posts and stuff like we were just talking about before we started recording. I got four little kids still, so I spend most of my time reading stories to them, not reading social media stuff. But I definitely have read all the stuff right now, and a lot of it was just for that. Was trying to understand which order. Now when you asked us, like before all this actually like came true, we thought, hang on a second, we just got a cartoning machine. And we have a variety pack in feed table for it. What if we made a greatest hits like Hopalicious, Ambergeddon, Nut Brown, and Unshadowed? That make a pretty good variety pack, for a 12 pack. But then we started thinking, oh, well, is that the combo? Like, what is it? So we're actually like hoping and looking forward to getting a lot of feedback from everyone out there. Now, we've been thinking about this for a couple months, and there's a pretty well-populated list of beers that could definitely work. So it makes our job hard. They're like good and bad there because you want to bring them out in the right order and do the right thing. But we're actually looking for a lot of input from everybody to kind of figure out that thing. I know we've kind of committed internally to bringing back to doing Octillion for an Oktoberfest. So like we've had October Ale in our history, and we've never really brewed a true blue like Oktoberfest for our own purposes for Carbon 4. This year we're making a couple for some contract stuff, but then we'll be making Octillion. So I think we'll make space for that for sure. The other ones are we're still trying to figure that out, seeing how people will respond. And the first point of order is to just get Hopalicious back on the shelf and get that heartbeat going again.
Yeah.
And get that stabilized. We're not going to wait super long till it's 100% stabilized, but it seems like breweries nowadays, if you're not known for new things every week or every other week, if you're not known for the iterations, then you really just get like a chance to bring out one big beer, maybe two, as like a mainstay. And for us, that's been Fantasy Factory, and now in our calendar for this year, we're bringing back a lot of fan favorite ones and also like brewery favorite ones with Lady Luck and Block Party and Idiot Farm and things like that. So for Ale Asylum, it's definitely Hopalicious was their overarching, volume carrier. And then it's like, well, let's pick some really good, awesome beers to kind of fill in, so that there's only so much room on the shelf now. So we want to fill that space with hard hitters that are fan favorites. And we're really looking for a lot of feedback to help us figure that out.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned in that answer, which was mainly about Ale Asylum, you mentioned some of your own beers. So yeah, and this has got to be, well, let me jump back for a second. Is there anything before I would definitely want to ask that question, but is there anything that you're excited about in that portfolio to like take on as like the brewer in you? Like you are excited to make this beer because of a recipe or, a technique or something that it uses or anything like that?
I would say, if there's a couple of names that populate in my mind that I don't know if it'll get to what I want to, Satisfaction Jackson, Sticky McDougal,
Scotch Ale, yeah.
and Bedlam, because Bedlam was the first Belgian beer I ever liked. I'm not as much of a Belgian beer fan.
Okay.
There's like something about that peppery phenolic character in the yeast that actually tastes. It's like the same taste I get in my mouth when I have migraines. And I used to have like a really bad problem with migraines very often. And so there's something about it. I start drinking it and I'm like, oh, I got a migraine. I'm like, no, it's just the beer. So Bedlam just hit on all cylinders. I had that when I thought, oh my goodness, this opened the door for me to a whole class of beers I couldn't appreciate before. So I definitely want to do some of those. I don't know if we'll get to Sticky, but like during when I got married, we were living in Montana at the time, and I came back to Madison for my bachelor party. We went and rented a cabin out in the Dells, and it was Hopalicious and Sticky McDougal and a lot of whiskey too for my bachelor party. But it always holds a special place in my heart. And Satisfaction Jackson is like very centennial driven, and kind of a lot like Two Hearted. And I know Zach and I used to geek out about that years and years ago before we ever even talked about opening up our own brewery. So
nice.
Those stick out for me. And then the other night when we were having beers with Dean and Otto, like when we first just closed the deal, like last Wednesday night, there was a lot of talk about some stouts and porters that they had done in the past, like one from Angelic way back when that was bottle conditioned, and some other darker beers. And I'm really like a dark beer fan myself, so I love dark, rich stouts and porters. So I would love to bring back a few of those.
Nice. Okay, back to the question that I was about to ask. So, obviously you're now kind of helming two different breweries under one roof. There is clear competition between some of these brands with some of the beers that you do. Oh, I mean, obviously, like there's competition. Like, I mean, Ale Asylum has all the beers, so but particularly, with the Madison home team, there's potential, overlap in consumer there. And I think kind of like, I would say like the overall kind of style of, hop forward, but malt interesting, I think that there's some shared, there's some similarities between K4 and Ale Asylum's, portfolios. So how are you going to, again, I know this is, we're very early in this, but how do you when you're thinking about managing that and not stepping on your own feet, I'll say, um, how, like, what how do you think about that?
I think there's definitely more inevitably than definitely, but inevitably there's going to be some cannibalizing of our volume, because there's folks that might have hopefully migrated to some carbon 4 beers when they couldn't, when they ran out of Ale Asylum stuff on the shelf. Um, in terms of the style, you kind of hit the nail on the head. I'd have actually never seen any of their recipes until just a little bit ago. And that was one thing that really hit me, was how similar our brewing styles were. Like, very, they were using pale ale based malt instead of just like standard 2 row, which is like, we've used Golden Promise for since the beginning. I think we'll have to let Golden Promise go this year because of like UK energy prices and all kinds of
Oh,
stuff. It's
really?
just getting out of control
Okay.
across the whole board. It's just like, we're gonna have to change tack a little bit. But we've used like a lot of UK malts, and but they, same thing, like raw pale ale as a base malt is like very, very close to Simpson's Golden Promise. It's kind of, I was my Zach and I, my brother, were talking about that today. I was like, between the two malts, they're really good. One's grown in northern Scotland and malted in northern England and then shipped across the pond. One's grown in the Midwest and malted in Minnesota, and um, they're both very delicious species of barley. Uh, it kind of made me think. My first analogy was, it's kind of like a Ponderosa steak and like a chop house steak. You know, I'm like, I used to work at Ponderosa, and there were some good steaks here and there. If you got a good cut, you could get it. But I thought, no, it's not quite that. The difference between the two is more like it's always a chop house steak, but it's like butter on it versus herb butter. You know, it's like one just is like, oh my goodness, that's over the top. You're right. So they're their silos over at Ale Asylum are filled with like raw pale ale. They were using UK dextrin malt like we were, and they're using Simpson's malts for their caramel malts and such. So when I looked at it all, I was like, well, this is, wow, we're actually like very similar the way we brew, and I never knew that.
Okay.
Never really poked about it, and never asked about it. And so that's really cool. In the marketplace, there is definitely going to be some cannibalizing. Our big hope is that when it comes time to have tap handles at a bar, a lot of beer buyers at bars, what they'll do to kind of keep the peace among the different salespeople and the different distributing houses, they might say, all right, these 2 handles are for General Beverage, these 2 are for Wisconsin Distributing, these 2 are for Frank, so on and so forth, right? So my hope is that they don't see us just as like Hopalicious and Fantasy Factory are just the same K4 brand, and we get one of the 2. I hope we get both handles, you know. That would be the hope. But I know it won't always happen. But space on the shelf, I think, in the sense, the real bet here and the hope is that people who are really true blue fans of Ale Asylum, who have been following them since the beginning, who Hopalicious was their way of relaxing on a Friday or Saturday. Like, that's what made that moment special for them. You know, when they wanted to celebrate something, they thought to themselves, hang on a second, this needs one more thing. You know, Hopalicious, like, now it's perfect, right? For those folks who that was an intricate part of their life and the way that they celebrated, I just want to offer them the same experience again and say, hey, man, we got you. Like, this didn't just go away into history. It's here. It's really cared for. I think we're like best place to bring it back. So I hope that the people there who maybe went away from ale, didn't have ale anymore, and they went to somewhere totally else, not carbon 4, we can recapture them as a business statement, you know, for our purposes, you know, that they buy the Ale Asylum stuff. In terms of the broader picture, if I zoom out now a little bit to more like 20,000 feet, one of the things with like contract brewing, not only we had to like fill up our pipeline and our brewery to like monetize the equipment and stay busy and be solvent as a brewery, but you started thinking to yourself, you know, like the younger version of me would have had a chip on his shoulder that was like, well, you know, I wouldn't probably want to admit it, but I'd be like, I want to, I want to
Yeah.
win, but I want to win on merit. And there's a lot of dirty games that get played that, whatever. But like I want it to go, and we want to make our own stuff. And I've always liked to help people, but now as a business case, it's more like, well, guess what? There's a lot of competition, and I want to stack up W's big and small. So when we contract brew it for someone else, number one, we put our heart and soul into it. My whole team is like very passionate about quality and kicking ass every day. They're like the best team. So when we contract brew, we make a small margin on it, and those are little W's on the shelf, right? And then when they buy our brands, then we get a little bit bigger W's. So as long as we're stacking up W's and not goose eggs, or complete losses, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's how we're going to try to stay the course, just as a business. So I
Yeah.
mean, everybody start off craft beer early on because we're all romantic about beer and crap, and we're still there. But the other half of it is that the reality is we're light manufacturing, and manufacturing they're just there's inputs and outputs, and there's a business to be run. So
Yeah.
you got to find a way.
You mentioned earlier the kind of some numbers that to me kind of set the frame for your expectations for this play, for the business. And you said something like 15 to 16,000 is the capacity of K4 right now.
Yeah, I think overall, we have the capacity to basically like package 80 to 90 barrels a day on a normal shift on our packaging line, which is like 2 tanks for us and the way that our brewery set up.
Mhm.
So if we do that 5 days a week, that means we will have canned about 18,000 barrels, maybe 19,000 barrels. And then if you add kegs in, it's even more. So our fermentation farm can really only tolerate or support up to about 15,000 barrels, plus or minus 1,000 barrels in there, depending upon the mix of lager, ale, lutra,
Yeah.
different things,
Yeah.
right?
Sure.
So the other 5,000 barrels, that's what we're filling with, like sodas, NA stuff, sparkling water, CBD water, THC stuff, things that move quicker.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just doing the math, and you said you were at about 10,000 barrels of your own stuff this year
Yeah, I
or
think
last year.
right before COVID, I think we got like just below 12, somewhere in there, 11, 12. This last year, we were just below 10. So, we're kind of seeing a little bit of a decline in there, but overall, we've held the line pretty well, compared to.
With those other customers. Okay. So I mean, is that kind of how you see this? Is like Ale Asylum might be a 4 or 5,000 barrel a year brand
God, I
for you
hope so.
guys? And I
I
mean,
hope
like, well,
so.
I mean, I guess that's the question. Like, I mean, like, looking back at Ale Asylum, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I know they were like in the 20s for a couple of years there. And I guess I think like the, I, see some of this with Eagle Park and Milwaukee Brewing too. Like there's a
Mhm.
corollary there that there's, I mean, it's a very similar
Very much. Yeah.
situation. And, I think if the expectations are kind of like low, I don't want to say low, like, I don't want to say it's easy, but like there's this built-in market for this stuff that never went away during whether it was for Milwaukee Brewing, the decline in quality or, whatever, whatever. But both of those, the beer, these brands didn't die because the brands were, nobody wanted them. These brands died because they overextended, and and then the financial pressures to meet this new level never happened. And you guys are in a good spot because you've stayed where you were, and where you've been for 10 years, and have built that up inside. And now I don't know what the true number of, like, what the like kind of passive market number of Ale Asylum beer per year might be, but
Yeah.
I bet you it's a lot more than I mean, and not to say that they weren't, that their teams weren't out there working hard, and that your teams won't all be working hard to sell it and move it, but it seems, I don't know, like depending on the investment, it seems like it could be a pretty good thing. I don't know what that, that's not a question, but what
No,
is that?
you're it's parroting a lot of our internal conversation over the last couple months here. That was a big question. I mean, we sat down with a lot of different people, including uh, our main distributor, General Beverage, who is also the distributor for the Ale Asylum brands. That was another
Dating,
reason
right?
why
Yeah, yeah,
why this made sense, was
yeah,
because it's going right back to where the people that sold it, everybody knew what to do already, right? We already knew the
yeah,
play. We already knew how to call the play. We knew how to run the ball. Let's get this done. Um, but we definitely had a lot of long conversations about, hey, how much is it going to be? Is it 1,000 barrels, 2,000? They peaked at like 22.5, somewhere in there. And then, kind of slowly stepped back down to, 19, 18 in there. And then in 2021, I think they were somewhere in the 9,000s, 9,500, somewhere around there. And then 22, when they had
and that
shut
was,
down, not as much because they stopped brewing basically in April, May, somewhere
yeah,
around there, June. Um, so um, the hope is, that we're at least 1,000 or 1,500 barrels, but the real success would be like if it was like 3, 4, 5,000 barrels, because it would be just a big chunk of business for us that's steady. And um, when your house isn't on fire, then you get to focus on having
mm-hmm,
fun and
mm-hmm,
doing happy fun time, having good family time, right? Because your house isn't on fire, you're not dying. So that's kind of the hope there, is that you get enough of a foundation, and then you can actually tolerate a few passion projects, for beers that might break even at best, but
yeah.
they were like
Take
really
some
fun.
swings.
They're really
Yeah,
great to put out there. They're just really expensive to make, and you just really want to do it, but you can't. Every beer you do can't be that, or you're just a really expensive hobby. You're not a business, because you still have to be a business, and you got to grow out of it. You got to grow up out and exit that startup phase, which means definitely standing on your own 2 feet. So there's definitely a corollary between what we just accomplished and Milwaukee Brewing with Eagle Park. So yeah, you have like a nice steady brand beer that you respect. You feel like, hang on, we know how to respect this. We're not going to screw it up. It's not just some greasy play. It's like, no, this would really help us. This would help them. They want to exit. This is this. Like everybody wins. And especially in this case, for our case, since it's being brewed where it started, with some of the people that always brewed it, it just feels like a natural fit.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Great. Um, all right. I think that's a good place to wrap. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us. And best of luck with all this.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
You bet.